Most people never hear the real reason some women stay on a man's mind for years. It isn't because they were the most attractive woman he ever dated. It isn't because they always knew the perfect thing to say, or because they mastered every dating rule. The women men quietly remember, compare others to, and secretly wish they could experience again all have one thing in common. They awaken something inside him that he didn't even know was there. Every man carries deep emotional patterns that influence who he bonds with, even if he's completely unaware of them. When those hidden patterns are touched through genuine connection instead of manipulation, his behavior begins to change naturally. He checks his phone hoping your name appears. He casually mentions you to his friends without realizing it. He catches himself rearranging plans just for another chance to spend time with you. He replays your conversations in his head, wondering why they keep echoing in his thoughts. The most surprising part is that he often can't explain any of it. Logic tells him it shouldn't matter this much. You may not match the image of the woman he always imagined himself with, yet something deeper keeps drawing him back. Once your connection reaches beyond simple physical attraction and touches his emotions, you quietly become a permanent part of his inner world, and the harder he tries to ignore it, the stronger it seems to grow. Before you assume this is another strategy for controlling someone's emotions, it's important to understand what this really means. This has nothing to do with pretending to be mysterious, acting unavailable, or forcing someone to chase you through mind games. It's about understanding the way emotional connection actually develops inside a man's mind. Much of the advice people hear encourages them to become more accommodating, more accessible, and more focused on pleasing the other person. Yet, lasting attraction rarely grows from perfection. It grows from emotional experiences that feel impossible to replace. Men don't become deeply attached because someone checked every box on a list. They become attached because one woman made them experience something they couldn't easily describe and couldn't recreate with anyone else. Those experiences follow invisible emotional patterns that most people never notice because they're too busy worrying about text messages, mixed signals, or whether they appeared too eager. Once you recognize those deeper patterns, confusion begins to disappear. You stop blaming yourself for every small interaction and start realizing that attraction isn't based on luck alone. It's created when emotional chemistry and timing naturally work together. The first and most powerful pattern begins with what I call the balance between presence and absence. Many women believe being emotionally present simply means always being available. They think it means replying immediately, saying yes whenever he's free, always showing excitement, and constantly making space for him. While those actions can certainly be kind, they aren't what creates lasting emotional impact. True presence is much more meaningful than constant accessibility. It means giving someone your complete attention while you're together and allowing healthy space when you're apart. From the very beginning, every man is quietly trying to answer two important questions, even if he never speaks them aloud. First, when she's with me, is she truly focused on this moment, or is part of her attention somewhere else thinking about work, scrolling through her phone, or already planning what comes next? Second, is she spending time with me because she genuinely wants to, or because she simply has nothing better happening? Many women unknowingly succeed with one question while completely missing the other. Some become endlessly available. They cancel plans whenever he calls, answer every message instantly, and slowly build their schedule around his life instead of their own. At first this may feel comforting to him, but eventually something changes. He stops missing you because your presence becomes guaranteed. There is no room for anticipation, curiosity, or emotional longing to naturally develop. You become familiar, dependable, and comfortable, but no longer unforgettable. Other women make the opposite mistake. They lead active, independent lives, which is healthy, but when they finally spend time together, their attention never fully arrives. Their phone constantly interrupts the conversation. They mention other plans, respond to notifications, or seem mentally occupied with everything except the person sitting across from them. Even without saying anything, a man feels the difference. Instead of feeling chosen, he feels like another responsibility squeezed into a busy schedule. Neither extreme creates lasting emotional connection because both leave out an essential ingredient. Everything changes when you combine complete presence with genuine independence. When you're together, you listen without distraction. Your phone stays out of sight. Your attention doesn't wander toward tomorrow or someone else's messages. You ask meaningful questions that invite real conversation instead of staying on the surface. You notice the subtle shifts in his expression, the excitement in his voice when he talks about something important, and the emotions behind his words. In those moments, he feels completely seen. Yet when you're apart, your life continues naturally. You don't constantly report every detail of your day or seek reassurance through endless messages. Your happiness isn't waiting for his next text. You have goals, friendships, interests, and experiences that exist whether he's present or not. He can sense that quiet confidence without you ever having to announce it. That balance has a surprisingly powerful effect on the human mind. Psychologists often describe it as a form of intermittent reward. But when it's authentic, it isn't manipulation at all. You're not calculating response times or pretending to be busy just to create suspense. You're simply living a meaningful life that he is invited to share instead of one that revolves around him. Because your attention is so genuine when you're together, your absence naturally carries emotional weight afterward. He notices the empty space because your presence felt significant rather than routine. During that space, his mind begins filling in the silence. He wonders what you're doing, remembers the conversations you shared, smiles at little moments that replay in his memory, and starts looking forward to seeing you again. This happens because people naturally value experiences that feel meaningful instead of constantly available. Men rarely pursue something they believe they already possess completely. They invest in what feels valuable, and real value comes from a woman who already enjoys a fulfilling life of her own. She has passions, friendships, responsibilities, and dreams that don't disappear simply because someone entered her life. That inspires him to earn a place within her world, rather than assuming it already belongs to him. This is the rhythm between presence and absence. It isn't coldness or emotional distance. It's showing up wholeheartedly when you're together and continuing to live wholeheartedly when you're apart. That natural rhythm gives the relationship a pulse that keeps him emotionally connected. He doesn't remember you because you were difficult to get. He remembers you because being with you felt unlike anything else. And once that feeling becomes linked with your presence, you stop being someone he simply dated and become someone he never truly forgets. That is the first emotional trigger. It's the one that transforms simple curiosity into lasting mental and emotional investment. The second trigger is something I call emotional recognition, and it's far more powerful than most people realize. Surprisingly, it has very little to do with how deeply you love him or how much effort you put into making him happy. Here's what many women are never taught. A man doesn't stay emotionally attached because someone loves him the hardest. He stays because someone understands him in a way few others ever have. There is a huge difference between showing love and truly seeing another person's inner world. Many women naturally express affection through kindness, encouragement, thoughtful gestures, loyalty, and constant support. Those things absolutely matter, but by themselves they don't create the kind of emotional connection that makes a man fear losing you. That deeper attachment forms when you recognize what exists beneath his words. You notice the struggles he rarely mentions, the pressure he quietly carries, the emotions he hides behind a confident smile, and the parts of himself he assumes no one will ever notice. Every man spends a surprising amount of his life wearing invisible armor, presenting certainty when he's full of doubt, appearing strong when he's exhausted, and acting like everything is under control, while privately trying to figure life out one day at a time. Most people never look beyond that outer image. They accept the version he presents and assume that's the complete story. But when you develop emotional recognition, you begin noticing the quiet details that reveal what words never do. You aren't trying to expose him or analyze him. You're simply paying attention in a way that makes him feel understood rather than examined. Maybe you notice how his shoulders tighten when a certain subject comes up. Maybe you hear the slight change in his voice when stress is building, even though he insists everything is fine. Maybe you recognize that his smile looks a little forced, or that his energy feels different from usual. Instead of immediately asking a dozen questions or insisting he explain himself, you acknowledge what you see with calm understanding. A simple observation like, "You seem worn out today," or "That really affected you, didn't it?" says far more than endless attempts to pull feelings out of him. Those quiet moments communicate something powerful. They tell him he doesn't have to translate every emotion for you to understand. Many men spend years feeling as though they must constantly explain themselves, defend what they feel, or prove that their emotions are valid. When someone recognizes what they're experiencing without demanding an explanation, something inside them begins to relax. It creates the rare feeling of being accepted exactly as they are, instead of being expected to perform emotional perfection. I remember hearing about a man who came home after one of those exhausting days where nothing catastrophic had happened, but everything felt heavier than usual. He wasn't looking for advice or solutions. He simply needed a little silence while his mind settled. His girlfriend at the time cared deeply about him, but she responded by repeatedly asking what was wrong, encouraging him to talk, and trying to solve a problem he hadn't even processed himself. Every well-meaning question made him retreat a little further inward. It wasn't because he disliked her concern. It was because each question felt like another expectation he couldn't meet in that moment. After that relationship ended, he eventually met someone else. Months later, he experienced another difficult day and came home carrying the same emotional weight. This woman glanced at him, softly said, "Rough day?" and then quietly sat beside him. She didn't push, analyze, or pressure him to speak before he was ready. She simply shared the space with him. After several peaceful minutes, he started talking on his own. Not because she convinced him, but because she created an environment where opening up felt natural instead of required. That single moment strengthened their bond more than hours of forced conversation ever could, because she instinctively understood something many people overlook. Men usually don't reveal what's inside because someone asks enough questions. They open their hearts when they genuinely feel emotionally safe. That is the essence of emotional recognition. It's learning to understand the language that isn't spoken aloud. Sometimes his silence isn't rejection. It's simply the way he processes difficult emotions. Sometimes his need for space isn't about escaping the relationship. It's about finding clarity before he returns fully present. Sometimes his temporary distance has nothing to do with you at all. Instead of assuming every emotional shift is personal or expecting him to react exactly as you would, you allow him to experience his feelings in his own way. You respect his emotional rhythm instead of trying to replace it with yours. You give him permission to be imperfect, uncertain, or overwhelmed without making him feel guilty for it. Over time, that kind of acceptance builds extraordinary trust. You become one of the few people around whom he doesn't feel the need to constantly appear strong, confident, or emotionally flawless. The mask begins to disappear because he knows it won't be used against him later. Once a man experiences that level of emotional understanding, his attachment naturally moves beyond physical attraction or romantic excitement. He begins to value your presence because of the emotional peace you bring into his life. Plenty of people may care about him, encourage him, or support him, but very few make him feel completely understood without requiring him to become someone else first. That feeling is exceptionally rare, and when he finds it with you, it becomes something he never wants to lose. What truly sets you apart is that you're the person who genuinely understands him instead of simply caring about him. That single difference changes everything. It takes a connection that could have stayed casual and transforms it into something emotionally rooted, something that survives long after the excitement of the early stages fades. He begins thinking about you in unexpected moments because it's incredibly rare to feel so deeply understood. That's the second emotional trigger. It changes attraction into real attachment. The third trigger is what I call freedom within commitment, and this is where many relationships quietly struggle. Most women don't realize they're unintentionally pushing a man away. The common belief is that men are afraid of commitment, but that's only part of the story. What many men actually fear is what they believe commitment will cost them. They worry it means losing their independence, giving up parts of themselves, constantly explaining where they are, asking permission for simple things, or feeling guilty whenever they want a little time alone or an evening with friends. As feelings grow stronger, it's natural to want more closeness, more conversations, and more shared experiences. Those desires usually come from love, not control. But from his perspective, if every step toward commitment feels like another piece of freedom disappearing, the relationship can begin to feel restrictive instead of comforting. When a man starts believing that loving someone requires sacrificing his identity, he instinctively pulls back, not because his feelings have disappeared, but because protecting his sense of self suddenly feels necessary. Everything changes when commitment feels like a choice instead of an obligation. That's what freedom within commitment is really about. It means creating a relationship where both people can remain completely themselves while building something meaningful together. You don't become anxious every time he wants an evening with his friends. You don't make him feel guilty for enjoying his hobbies or needing occasional solitude. You don't expect constant updates throughout the day just to feel secure. Instead, you trust because your confidence comes from within, not from controlling another person's behavior. That quiet security has an incredible effect. When a man doesn't have to fight for breathing room, he stops seeing independence and commitment as opposites. In fact, the more accepted he feels, the more naturally he wants to choose you. It's a pattern that repeats itself again and again. Relationships built on tight control often create distance, while relationships built on mutual freedom create closeness. It seems almost backwards until you realize something important. People value what they freely choose. If someone feels they no longer have a choice, even love can begin to feel like a burden. That's why maintaining your own identity is equally important. Continue investing in your passions, friendships, personal goals, and experiences outside the relationship. When your entire identity doesn't disappear into being someone's partner, you become someone who is choosing love rather than depending on it. That difference is deeply attractive. Most men don't dream of becoming another person's entire world. They simply want to know they're genuinely wanted by someone who already has a fulfilling life. Knowing that you could be happy without him but still choose to build a life beside him makes the relationship feel meaningful instead of obligatory. He doesn't associate you with limitations. He associates you with possibility. Being with you expands his life instead of shrinking it, and once that emotional connection forms, commitment no longer feels like giving something up. It feels like gaining something worth protecting. The fourth and final emotional trigger is what I call the growth catalyst, and this is often the deciding factor between relationships that slowly lose momentum and relationships that become stronger with time. One truth that rarely gets discussed is that many men quietly fear standing still. They don't want to wake up years later realizing they've become the same person they were a decade ago. They want to keep growing, improving, and becoming someone they're proud of. The woman who naturally encourages that growth without demanding it becomes incredibly difficult to replace. The important word is encourage, not pressure. Those are completely different experiences. Many people try to inspire change through criticism, constantly pointing out weaknesses, offering unsolicited advice, or highlighting everything that needs improvement. Even when those observations are accurate and well-intentioned, they often create resistance because they make someone feel like they're constantly being evaluated or repaired. A man doesn't want to feel like he's someone's unfinished project. The women who truly inspire lasting growth approach it from the opposite direction. Instead of constantly noticing flaws, they notice strengths. They recognize qualities worth developing and speak to them sincerely. They might say, "I really admire how persistent you are," or "The way you handled that situation showed real maturity," or "You have a way of making people feel heard, and that's something special." These aren't generic compliments meant to flatter. They're thoughtful observations that reflect genuine attention to his character. When someone consistently reminds him of the best parts of himself, he begins seeing those qualities more clearly. Without pressure or demands, he naturally wants to become even more of the man you already believe he can be. Being a growth catalyst doesn't mean becoming his teacher, therapist, or personal coach. It simply means your own commitment to growth quietly inspires the people around you. You continue reading, learning, pursuing your goals, challenging yourself, and becoming a stronger version of yourself because that's the life you want to live. That energy naturally influences others. Without saying a word, your example encourages him to reflect on his own ambitions and potential. He begins wanting to grow, not because you asked him to, but because standing still no longer feels satisfying. He wants to rise beside you, evolve with you, and become someone who contributes equally to the relationship. This isn't about competition or constantly measuring progress against each other. It's about creating a partnership where both people encourage one another to become their best selves. When a man experiences that kind of relationship, he doesn't simply appreciate it, he treasures it. Many people will accept him exactly as he is today, but very few will recognize the person he's capable of becoming while making him feel supported instead of pressured. That combination is unforgettable. Looking back at everything we've discussed, These four emotional triggers, the rhythm between presence and absence, emotional recognition, freedom within commitment, and becoming a catalyst for growth, are not tricks or manipulation techniques. They're the invisible framework behind meaningful emotional connection. They explain why some relationships remain ordinary while others become impossible to forget. The beautiful part is that none of this requires pretending to be someone you're not. It simply asks you to understand what genuinely builds lasting attachment. Be fully present when you're together and fully engaged in your own life when you're apart. Understand him without demanding constant explanations. Give love room to breathe instead of tightening your grip. Keep becoming the best version of yourself and let your example inspire rather than pressure. When these four elements naturally come together, everything begins to feel easier. You stop obsessing over every message, every pause, or every small interaction because you realize that the right connection doesn't need endless performance. It simply needs authenticity. When a man meets a woman who offers that rare combination of confidence, understanding, freedom, and personal growth, he doesn't just stay interested. He begins recognizing that what you've built together is incredibly difficult to find. That's not manipulation. It's human psychology at its healthiest. It's the kind of bond that grows stronger with time instead of weaker, the kind that makes two people look back years later with gratitude rather than regret. Real love isn't built on chance. It's built on emotional rhythm, genuine understanding, and consistently nurturing the parts of each other that deserve to grow. And now you understand exactly how those deeper emotional connections are created. As you move forward, remember this above everything else. Lasting attraction is never built on pretending, chasing, or trying to become someone you think another person wants. The strongest relationships grow when two people feel emotionally safe, deeply understood, and completely free to be themselves. The four emotional triggers we've explored aren't secret techniques for controlling someone's feelings. They're reminders of what real connection looks like when it's built on trust, respect, and authenticity. When you're fully present, emotionally aware, secure enough to give freedom, and committed to your own growth, you naturally become someone who leaves a lasting impression. The right man won't value you because you played the perfect game. He'll value you because being with you brings out the best version of himself while allowing you to become the best version of yourself. That's the kind of relationship worth building, one that grows stronger through understanding instead of fear, through choice instead of pressure, and through mutual respect instead of control. If you can embody those qualities consistently, you won't have to convince someone to stay. The person who's truly right for you will recognize your value, choose you willingly, and continue choosing you because the connection feels genuine, peaceful, and impossible to replace. That's where real love begins, and that's how unforgettable relationships are created.